Hello and welcome to the next section in the training on roles-based access control. We start getting into some of the more difficult concepts now when we start talking about grants within RBAC. So let's just recap what we've learned so far. We talked about the roles and responsibilities. We talked about permission sets, which are almost like menus with functions in them. What we haven't talked about is how those two things are connected together. How do you actually give access to a permission set or a menu to a particular role? And the missing piece of that discussion is a concept that Oracle calls grants. So a grant, a simple level, gives access to a permission set for a given role. Okay, if you think of how standard responsibilities work, with a responsibility you define a top menu and you've got one-to-one connection there between a responsibility and a menu, and that menu then has many sub-menus. With roles and permission sets, it doesn't work the same way. A role can have many permission sets. And each role is connected to a permission set by a grant. So basically a grant is just something to connect that menu to that role. Examples here: grant search all workers to HR admin role. So that's something where we talked about the permission set, being able to search all workers, and we talked about the role of HR admin. This grant would connect both of those together. Granting administrative photos to the employee role is another example here, where if you wanted to give employees the ability to create, delete or update photos, that grant would connect that permission set, administer photos, to that role employee. Okay, so in concept terms it's very, very similar to that step that when you create a responsibility you assign a menu to that responsibility, but in this case roles have many grants, in other words they have many permission sets. And you can also do other things around grants, like give a grant to every single user. So rather than a particular role has access to a permission set, every single user has access to that permission set. It's called a public grant. And there's other options too. Now grants form a very, very important piece of Applaud. So what I would say is we go through this recorded training once, and if you need to recap it after the end, you're not too sure, go through it again, because understanding grants is really at the core of how Applaud security works. So how do we use RBAC in Applaud? Well, this is a simplified diagram here. We have the role at the top, we have the permission set here, so the role would be something like employee or manager in our case. Then we have the permission set. So I've used an example of the personal information layout. Personal information layout lets you do things like maintain your address, maintain your phone numbers, maintain your contacts. So the permission set itself is like a menu. In this case we're going to say it's the personal information layout. And then each individual permission is like the view function within the layout. It's basically access to each function that forms a panel or region within Applaud. All right, and what we're missing is anything to connect that role to the permission set, and that's where the grant comes in. And that grant in Oracle connects this permission set to this role. It says that the employee role is able to access the personal layout menu and update basic details, update addresses, update phones, and update contacts. Now we'll get into the most complicated part of RBAC soon, which is data security. For now we're just going to focus on how these grants are set up and just look at a few simple cases. So viewing grants, how do you actually view grants in Oracle? You may have already seen this from when you've been experimenting, but again we go into user management, we query back the roles, and then you press the update button over here. Again, there's a little bit of confusion in this screen. You're not actually updating anything, but you need to press the update button to view the grants that have been set up for that particular role. So don't worry about pressing update, you're not going to change anything, but that's the only way that you can see the grants for a particular role. A little bit confusing, I have to say, but there you go, that's Oracle for you. So if I wanted to see the grants against the employee self-service role, this is the one we tend to do most of our work against. I press that update button and I'd see the details. And then I come to a screen that's a bit like this. I've simplified the screen for now. The screen actually has more information on it than this. But if you actually look at what's here, we have the role code here. Forget about the category, it doesn't matter, and the name. Then if you look at how a grant is put together, it's just given a name. I do recommend you kind of name your grants sensibly because they can build up to be quite a high number for a project. But in this case, what we're doing is we're giving access to this role to the overview layout. And this is the permission set there. So think of this as the menu. This can actually be a menu, it doesn't need to be permission set. It could be a menu created in the menu screens, but whatever. This is that layout menu. So remember back to the first set of training when we talked about layout menus and the view functions. That's the menu that you set on this grant. Now we're going to touch slightly on data security. You see these two rows, two columns here. We see the data object and what is called the data context type. Again, rather confusing language from Oracle here, but we'll try to take it slowly. This is basically getting into data security. And what it's saying at a high level, it's saying I can have access to look at this overview page against every single assignment on the database. That's what this means. It's basically securing against this object, which is the HR assignment table, and all rows within that table. We're going to be talking about security on this part of security a lot more over the final two sessions of this suite. But for now, just think of these as these are like public pages. So if I actually go into Employee Centre itself, just to show you what I mean by that. So in the example I'm just going to walk through, I'm going to take that overview layout as an example. Okay, so here I am, I'm logged in as me, loading the menu up, and if I click on profile, the top one in the profile is this overview panel. Okay, overview layout. It's got 3 panels on it: contact employment supervisor, all read only, quite public information that shows on this. Nothing secure particularly, it's just general employee directory information basically. So this is showing in this menu because we've set up a grant to say that if you've got the employee role, which I have of course, then I can see this layout against any assignment I query back, which basically means if I go to someone, I can query anyone back in Employee Centre anywhere. If I query someone in the direct report list, let's just find somebody, we go in and have a look at this chap. Okay, again on the menu here we've got this overview is at the top, and it's got a few items on here, the contact details, employment details. In other words, I can see the same layout against this person as it is against me. Let's see another example. If I go back to my home page, and let's go back to the profile page. Okay, let's go and look at the CEO, the Chief Executive, William Tugger. He's the person at the top of the tree. So I can still look at his details in here. Just wait for the screen to load. What I'm expecting to see when this loads is that remember that this is like a public page, this overview layout. So even when I'm looking at someone who isn't in my supervisor tree, because it's a public grant, I should still be able to see the layout information about that person. So when this loads, we should see underneath his photo the overview layout as well, so I can see his contact details, his employment details as well. Okay, here it comes, slowly but surely. So even though I'm looking at the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO, I'm still got this overview panel coming back because this is a public panel. All right, there's no, well, there's security on it, but the security is open security. I can see it for everybody. Let's go and find someone, someone random in the business. We're going to look for all the people called Pamela. So we'll wait for this to bring back a list of people results. Okay. Only 2 people here. So I've got 2 people in my list here. I've got Pamela Goldman, I've got Pamela Rodriguez. So if I bring up the little sub menu here, again I've got profile in here. It's because it's an open page. I can see it against this person, even though I've got absolutely no other access against her, apart from a few little bits. I can still see her profile. If I look in Pamela Goldman, bring down that menu, again I can see her profile in there. If I was to search for, let's just change the search a little bit, Pam. Now I know that this person, I happen to know that this person is in my hierarchy. If I pull down that menu item there, well, I've got a little bit more now. That's because actually Employee Centre knows that she's in my hierarchy, and even when I'm finding someone through this search, it's still giving me a bunch of options, but it's still giving me that profile one at the top. So when I click on profile, I would see that person's information. So all of this is coming because of the employee grant that I have set up. In terms of how you actually create these in Oracle, we'll cover a little bit more of that in the next part. At this point, I'm going to just start doing a small whiteboard session because I find that this topic is a lot easier to understand if we can start to put some visuals about across. So before we go into the exercise for this topic, I'm just going to start up a very small whiteboard just to give you a bit better understanding of how this might work. So I'm going to keep this whiteboard going through the next couple of topics and add to it as we get further across. And this is really just to visually describe the setup that we've talked about so far. Right, so let's start at the top. Okay, this is your user. Okay, so in this particular case, we're logging on as this guy here. It's a little bit small, see if I can make that bigger. Okay. User. Okay, so first block on my diagram, we've got the user at the top, okay? Standard Oracle user. And then underneath, we're going to add a couple of responsibilities. So in this particular case for this guy, oops. He's got 2 responsibilities that we're interested in. We're interested in employee self-service and manager self-service. Okay, so this layer here is the responsibility layer. Okay, I'll just do a couple of lines between those. Okay, So at this point now, you've just got your standard Oracle setup. This is what you'd have when you come in to a standard Oracle implementation. Your users will have employee self-service responsibility and then have manager self-service responsibility if they're a supervisor. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to add in a couple of roles. Okay, so I'm going to use the code here just to make it clear that these are roles. That's a little bit light. Let's change the color to be a bit darker so you can see it. Okay, UMX pipe XXX ESS. Okay, so the employee role, right? Over here we've got UMX pipe XXX ESS. Okay, and these are roles. So again, let's draw some lines on here. So these are joined here. Can you remember what joins the roles to the responsibilities? Role inheritance. Drawing it slowly so you can remember it. Role inheritance is these and here. Really, really important, if you've forgotten already, that you connect up your custom roles to your customer's responsibility. Right. I'm going to rub this out just to give myself a bit more space, but role inheritance is the connector there. Okay, now let's put some permission sets in. I think for the first one, I'm just going to do one permission set. And it's going to be the overview one we talked about. Overview. So here we have our permission sets. Okay. And if you like, we've actually got 3 little permissions in there. One for contact, one for employment details, and one for the supervisor tree. So those little permissions in there. What I do is I draw those in a different colour just to make that a bit clearer. So I haven't really got space to write on those. So hopefully you can remember what they are. Permissions. Right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of forward a little bit to the next topic, but hopefully keep it simple at this point in time. What I'm going to do now is actually put on a little bit of data security here. And what this table here is, sorry, what this set is, it's the set of all rows on the per all assignments table. Okay, so I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but it helps on this particular piece. So what we've got now, so this we've talked about in the first 2 sessions in this suite. We've talked about roles and responsibilities, we've talked about permission sets, we've talked about permissions. And where we talked about grants, you can see here that these permission sets and these roles are not connected in any way. So how do you connect those 2 things? It's the grant. And if I draw the grant we've just been talking about on, I'm going to use red. The grants that we're talking about joins this role to that permission set and against this piece of data security. And what that means is that if an assignment is in here, I'm looking at that assignment in Applaud, I have access to this page for that assignment. That's what that grant is doing. So the red is the grant. All right. So what that means is I log in, because I've got this responsibility, I've got this role, I query back a person in Employee Center. In the first case, is going to be me. So let me just go back to my home page here. So this is my assignment. Because I've got the employee role, I can see this layout against my assignment. And if we go in and have a look at the how that's set up in the grants, I go into user management down here. If we're going to role and role inheritance, for the UMX XXAS ESS, and I look at this particular grant role here, I'm pressing the update button over there. There we are, right at the top. Okay, that in Oracle terms represents this on that diagram. So this line here is that red grant there. It's connecting this role there to this permission set, which is that with the 3 permissions in it. And then this data object is basically saying I can see that layout against any single assignment on the system. Okay, that takes a little bit of getting used to, and it takes a little bit of reflection. But that's the simplest case is RBAC in action. Okay, don't think that's all. There are 2 more bits of RBAC to do, but before we go on to some of the harder topics, we're going to do a 10-minute exercise. Normal routine. It's really to get you using the user management screen as well, and to think about how to query back and read those grants. One thing I should mention is when you do go into the user management screen, you'll find that our system has a lot of grants set up. For this exercise, you want to probably order by columns in here. You can use the standard Oracle controls to order a particular column to get the information you need to answer the exercises. So I will pause the training for about 30 seconds. This exercise should take you around 10 minutes, and once the training unpauses, I'll go through the answers with you. Good luck. All right, good. Okay, let's go through this particular training exercise. First question, navigate to user management responsibility, query back the role with code UMX XXS ESS. How many grants are defined? Well, I've already done that, but let's do it again anyway, in case you had any trouble. Okay, so we go to user management at the bottom. We go to roles and role inheritance. We go to UMX pipe XXAS ESS. That was the exact name, wasn't it? Yep. Press go. Okay, so to see the grants, we click this update button. And then really just the answer is how many grants are there on this particular one. Well, you can see some of the ones in here are more complicated than what we've covered so far, but we'll get on to that next. To see all the grants, I go next 10 all the way through to the end. I think it's about 60 or so. We go 54. Okay, so the answer to that question was 54. Explain what the Applaud grant overview layout achieves and why it is set up that way. Well, crikey, I've given you a really good exercise on that, but let's have another look. So this is where I was referring to. It's easy to find this one if you ordered by data context type. So I get the all rows ones. Let's take a different one actually. Let's look at qualifications, because that's set up the same way. So qualifications gives you access to the qualifications layout, and against this data security means you can look at qualifications against any assignment you have access to, any assignment on the database. So what that tells me is if I'm in here, I should be able to see qualifications for everybody. Let's see if that's true. There we go. So now I'm looking at the CEO. It's always a good test because you shouldn't be able to see much about against the CEO. And here I see qualifications on here. So if I click on qualifications, I'm not sure that he's actually going to have any. Let's see. The point is I've got access to that layout, that menu option here. I've got access to. So yeah, unfortunately he hasn't actually got any. But the key thing is here, the option is on my menu. I'll go to my manager, Casey Brown. Again, qualifications is there. I can click on that and see if he's got any. No, he hasn't got any either. Not many qualifications in this particular company. Anyway, the key thing in here is you've got that option in the menu against anybody you find within Applaud. The other one here that's got all rows against it is social layout, which actually is the bio and feedback option on the menu. Let's go back. There's bio, tags and feedback. Again, that's a public grant. That means you should see bio, tags and feedback against any of the people that you can query back. So again, if I go in and look at the CEO, I should see bio, tags and feedback on there. And it's because of this grant, so that the grant social layout is again against all rows of the assignment. You'll notice this one in here, the Applaud HR transactions. That's might seem a bit weird at this point. So because of the data object isn't assignment, we haven't really got on to other aspects of data security that too much yet. But for now, just focus on the assignment ones. Again, bio, tags and feedback is there as well. Okay. Which other layouts are set out as public for the employee self-service role? I've just covered that. So qualifications and the social layout. Query about the role with code UMXXX ASMSS. How many grants are defined? Let's do that quickly. On the wrong screen. So I'm just going to cancel this. And I am going to go to UMX pipe XASMSS. Here's the Applaud Manager Self-Service role. How many grants are defined on this one? Shouldn't be as many. 16, okay, a lot less for managers. And you see things like disciplinary, it's quite a nice one. You can see some training history, assignment history, other things that you might expect to see as a manager, but you wouldn't necessarily see against a non-manager. So if I look as an example here, let's take performance history as a good one. And I go into here. So I can't see performance history on here at all. But if I go to someone that I know is in my team, let's go to this person. So I just happen to know that she's in my team, I think. There's training history. Performance isn't coming up for some reason, but there's training history as an example. It's taking a while to load. I'll go back. And then it says go into the Employee Center as a manager and use the team view to inspect the options against direct report. You should be able to see the overview region even though this layout isn't granted against the manager role. Okay, so let's take this one a little bit more slowly. This is a good test. If you got this question and understood it, you're in a good place. If you didn't understand this question or you don't understand it as I've gone through, it's worth you just taking a pause and just trying to get it right in your head because it's quite important for the next piece. What you notice as you go down these manager permissions and grants is there's nothing for the overview layout. Okay, so your old chart, disciplinary, assignment, time card, discipline, time card, assignment history, training history. To next, performance history, salary history, and so on. Okay, you can't see on this manager role overview, the overview layout. And yet when I go and look at a subordinate, like Pam Gardner, there's overview. So how has that worked? Okay, because the manager role hasn't got access to this layout, and yet I can see it. Okay, if I go back to my home screen and I look at the direct reports, okay, every one of these people here, I will see the overview layout. Or when it actually loads, it's got a slow training instance for this session, unfortunately. Let's just wait for it to spin round. Okay, this profile. Well, we know that we can see it for Pam. There's profile there. And I can tell you this will see profile as well, that when that comes up. So why is that? Well, the question is why do you see that when it's not against the manager role? And it really goes back to this diagram here that we had. Barry, when he logs in, has the employee role, and it's the employee role grants access to see that page for everybody. It's not the manager role that's granting access, it's the employee role. And because the employee role grants access to that page for absolutely everybody in the business, the whole manager thing is a red herring. It's a question designed to fool you, really. There's absolutely nothing around the manager role that's giving you access to this layout. Just because we're looking at direct reports, you could be looking at the chief executive or the VP of HR or anybody else in the organisation. Because the grant is against the employee role and it's a public grant, I have access to see absolutely this page against absolutely everybody. Okay, so if you're still sort of scratching your head on that piece, I'd really recommend going back to this recording, maybe sitting through it again, and really getting this correct in your mind, because it gets important when we move on to the next exercise. Okay, so that is the end of this particular session. The next session is one of my favourites. We'll be talking about data security and data objects, and that's a lot of fun. So that will be the subject of the next training. Thanks, that's the end of this session.